Hello, everybody, and welcome to Warrior Goddess Wednesday. And today, on today's show, I am your host, Rachel Z. I never introduce myself when I do these live streams. And I am currently cosplaying as none other than April O'Neil because today's show is all about the Royal Fixed Stars, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Renaissance Man, because they all go together in terms of this talk. So I originally did a talk about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles way back, not way back in the day, but a little while back, which was basically to line up each of the Ninja Turtles with each of the fixed stars. So I did a whole presentation previously about the fixed stars specifically, and in astrology there are 3 different types of modalities, let's call it that. I like to call it the alchemy of astrology because you'll have 3 different quadrants. So you'll have a cardinal sign, a fixed sign, and a mutable sign. So example being Aries, Taurus, and then Gemini, and then just goes in that cycle, and there's like 4 quadrants of those. So the fixed so Aquarius, we're in Aquarius season, and the fixed signs are Taurus, Scorpio. They oppose each other. And then we have Aquarius and Leo. They oppose each other. And you can find tremendous insight in the areas by which, like if you're a certain sign, if you look at the opposing sign, there is a lot of understanding and intel that can happen from that. Like, for example, I'm a Taurus and my mother's a Scorpio, so that that caused a lot of I know a lot more now because of that, and our relationship has improved because of certain accommodations I understand now about Scorpios, and myself too, really. So it's going to be a little bit of a refresh. We're going to go over a presentation that I have with each of the turtles, but we're going to add a little bit of an extra flavor to today's presentation because I'm going to talk about the Renaissance men who inspired each of the names of the turtles. So Leonardo da Vinci for Leonardo, Raphael, all of those. And to see if we put all of those clues together, do we get anything interesting that these stories have to tell us? And then after that, I'm going to do a reading on studio, not a super long reading. I'm usually doing like a 2-hour reading as Supergirl, and I'm going to continue Crises on Infinite Earths on Friday. So my schedule's already messed up, but whatever. Today is technically going to be Thursday if we consider the reading, but I'm doing a crossover DC reading of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Batman. So it's cool because Batman's always so serious, even in, he needs other characters in there to have it not be quite so like, okay, we get it, Batman. We know it's tough. And then on Friday, I will be also doing a solo show of the Truth, Beauty, Freedom, and Love show about characters in comic books that I once found annoying, but now actually really respect and adore. And those characters include Batgirl, because I used to feel like Batgirl was like a rival to me for Robin's affections when I was younger. Doesn't make sense, but that's the way. I feel like that's a Scorpionic thing to kind of do, just get jealous over things that really have nothing to do with anything. But so there's, where was I going with this? Oh yes, the reading, because Leonardo da Vinci, when we get into his section, there's a character in DC Comics called Zatanna, and Zatanna's a magician, and her ancestry traces back to Leonardo da Vinci. We'll get into that. It'll be a nice way to segue out of it, but I'm just going to get us to go right into the presentation, and so let's get started. Okay, so let me just make sure I have my slides right, and let me just check to see. Yes, okay, we are firing on all cylinders, and we are all good. So let's go into the presentation. All right, so making sure that I have yes. So we're going to go into the Royal Stars. I'm going to leave a link to where you can get the full-on presentation where I got into more depth about this, as well as the presentation about more of the mythology of the fixed stars. Now, I will admit, this lines up more with the fixed signs as opposed to the fixed stars. there's just intel from a perspective that they're called fixed signs because in each of those fixed signs, there is a royal star, which was looked at as a guardian of heaven. And in my own novel of the Dragon Warriors, this also lines up from a perspective of these are houses of alchemy. Because they're different elements and because fixed signs are very much the synthesis, they're not like cardinal signs and not like mutable. They're more of like I'm using the same word, but fixed standard kind of way to, if you were to build a tower or if you're thinking about construction, you would want to build anything on like a fixed kind of foundation. You wouldn't want to build it on like mutable foundation. That's just an example. But regardless of that, I think that the intel will stay the same. So as we go, I will update it. So choose your player, because to me, looking at Astro, looking at these stories are all ways of how we empower ourselves in the game of life. And we all have different things that we're called to play out here. And this is, when you look at your own birth chart, it's like a way of, if you get an astrologer to take a look at it, you can find where you are being called to live out a certain hero's journey and archetype, or perhaps there's certain things in past lives that are making themselves apparent. But we're going to look at the fixed signs, and in doing so, I'm going to also talk about cardinal and mutable signs as well. So first of all, let's talk about Taurus, because I'm a Taurus, and so I'm a little bit, biased to it. And the fixed royal star that is in Taurus is Aldebaran. And this is known as like the red bullseye of Taurus. It looks like a red bullseye if you were to look at it. And I consider Michelangelo to be the Taurus, and you'll see why. We're going to go into an in-depth look into each one of them. So Michelangelo, Taurus, Aldebaran, Watcher of the East, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I will have to double check my previous presentation specifically, but that's the lineup. Aldebaran is the fixed star in the constellation of Taurus as the red bullseye, and lines up with Michelangelo's Ninja Turtle self. Next we have Antares, which I look as the it's technically in the fish, I believe. Yes, no, Fomalhaut is, sorry. Antares is in Scorpio, and I looked at this as being lining up with Raphael, because Raphael is kind of like the bad boy of the Ninja Turtles, the one who's like more likely to go on his own and do things, someone who has a little bit of a dark side. I remember when I was reading a certain comic book of the Ninja Turtles, Raphael went through this period where he would wear this like dark suit of some sort. So that's something to consider, as well as to why I chose Raphael as being a Scorpio and the fixed star of Antares in that domain. Next, we're going to talk about Aquarius, because we are in Aquarius season. And if we think about the precession of the equinox, and we're now in the age of Aquarius, what does that mean? We are moving actually kind of backwards through the zodiac wheel. So from Pisces, we are moving into Aquarius. So that being said, those constellations in the sky are very close together. And so Fomalhaut is actually a star that's considered the fish mouth. And but it's still attributed to Aquarius. And that's where like the interesting thing about Aquarius and Pisces is, because people sometimes would confuse and think that Aquarius, aqua, right? It's a water sign. It's not a water sign. It's an air sign. But air signs in fixed, it's like this like mental elevation, super smart, but also can be fixed in ideas. It can be hard to change your mind about things even when you know better. And Donatello I saw as being Aquarius, because he's the brains of the operation. He's got a very close relationship with April O'Neil, but also at the same time, he's the nerdy one. He's like the Tesla of the Ninja Turtles. So I see that as Aquarius, very Donatello. Fomalhaut is the fixed star that resides in that domain. And then last but definitely not least, we have Regulus. I'm sure you may have heard about that. So Regulus is the fixed star that is in the constellation domain of Leo, And that lines up with Leonardo, leadership qualities, solar plexus, the will to get things done. Really interesting that Leo and Aquarius oppose each other. You can find a lot of similarities, but also in how they deal with things is going to be a lot different. And you can kind of see that in how the turtles are. Leonardo's not going to deal with the same problem as Donatello, and Donatello probably wouldn't want to be the leader of the group anyways. Raphael thinks he does, but he doesn't really want to. So we'll get into all of that in just a moment. Starting with Aldebaran. So let me see if I can make this a bit more. Let me flip to this actually. Much better. There. Okay. So Michelangelo, I actually wasn't my favorite character growing up, just because like he was kind of too goofy for me, but at the same time I've realized that I'm kind of like this. So that goes down to like the characters that you find annoying sometimes, or sometimes you're just like, you're like, oh wait, there's like elements in them that I can learn about myself as a result. So you can see here I have like some images as well. Like the Taurus is very much loves food, which is why I also picked this as being Michelangelo, because pizza, and he's just more like his relationships. He's able to actually like, because Taurus is ruled by Venus, and this idea that when push comes to shove, he's there for his friends, but it doesn't need to be overly serious about it. And Aldebaran is known as being accompanying the Pleiades and being their watcher. That's a whole other mythology I'm not going to get into today. I don't know if it necessarily matches up to the characterization of Michelangelo, but I'm also going to go into Michelangelo, the Italian artist, by which he was basically inspired. So from what I know, the creators of the Ninja Turtles, so first of all, the creators of the Ninja Turtles said that they basically first created it at their kitchen table, just like laughing and joking about things like, how funny would it be if like really slow turtles were actually really fast ninjas? So just like the juxtaposition of those two kind of things together is what they found so funny, and they just sketched, and it became a comic book, and it became a phenomena. And they realized like ninjas are Japanese, and they didn't want to disrespect Japanese culture by butchering Japanese names, so they went with Renaissance artists, which I think is very I like that a lot, because it's like if you think about the samurai or warriors of that nature, and like the art of war, and this idea of how artistic understanding and synthesization of those things are not so far like art and Venus, right? So Venus is the goddess of love, beauty, but also war. So being able to fight for the things that you love, and also having art tell those stories too. So I don't really know much about Michelangelo, the artist. He's an Italian artist. Oh, what happened here? I don't know why I did that. And it's like giving me an ad here. No ads free. What the heck are you doing now? No. Oh, I see what's happening. Let's ignore that. So I just wanted to read stuff about Michelangelo, not get into the weeds of what anything is. And I know I'm using Britannica, but just because we're doing an overall look at everyone, we could technically do these. It'd be funny if Michelangelo actually was a Taurus. He's not. He looks like he's a Pisces here, which would make sense because Pisces are very much attuned to the dream world. So Michelangelo di Lodovico, and he died at 88, February 18th. So his notable works are Bacchus. Oh yeah, very Dionysian, if you know about Bacchus. How come they don't show what it looks like? They just show him. This guy. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to read some more about him. Italian Renaissance Sculptor, painter, architect, and poet who exerted an unparalleled influence on the development of Western art. Michelangelo's Last Judgment. So there's, commissioned Pope Clement the Seventh commissioned Michelangelo to paint a fresco in the Sistine Chapel in 1534. A lot of like chapel painting, I think, was Michelangelo's jam. And Michelangelo was considered the greatest, let's take a look at that again, the greatest living artist in his lifetime. And since then, he has been held to be one of the greatest artists of all time. A number of his works in painting, sculpture, and architecture rank among the most famous in existence. Although the frescoes on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel are probably the best known, so yes, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel was painted by Michelangelo, was probably the best known of his works. The artist thought of himself primarily as a sculptor, so working with his hands, very tactile. That is very earthy and Taurus-y, even though he's a Pisces. But there's a lot there in terms of Pisces is also exalted in Venus, so in terms of like artistic expression, this makes a lot of sense. His practice of several arts, however, was not unusual in his time. So see Renaissance men, that idea of not just, look at this martial arts too. You may be, let's say your favorite weapon is a sword or you like a bow and arrow, but you would still learn the other weapons, right? Because it's just good to know all of it, to be a well-rounded individual, even though your expertise is perhaps in one thing. You don't want to ignore other aspects of what you're learning and get stuck. This place would rather us be much more siloed, and I think it's important for us to bring back Renaissance thinking, Renaissance ways of doing things. So this is a bit of more of the Sistine Chapel and just how much detail. That must have really hurt. You were just like painting like this the whole time. So let's see here. A side effect of Michelangelo's fame. So he's actually famous in his lifetime. That is also kind of lining up with what I consider with Michelangelo. He was more fully documented than any artist of the time or earlier, and he was the first Western artist whose biography was published while he was still alive, and there were actually 2 rival biographies. So that is interesting. Vatican is very much involved in a lot of this. I'm not too surprised considering how important art is to storytelling and all of that, and reality creation. So, what is this? Oh my gosh, hold on a second. I'm just going to adjust this. I was trying out a new background today. I don't know how I feel about it. So that's Michelangelo. And we're going to move on so that I don't end up spending too much time here. Sorry, as I'm fixing this live. All right. So that was Michelangelo, Taurus, Aldebaran, that kind of good stuff. Let's move on. So we have, full disclosure, my favorite Ninja Turtle was Leonardo because I have always loved like this leader, Boy Scout type, someone who's inherently good, like Captain America types, the leader of the group. There's always work that has to be done when you're a leader, but there's also the idea of an anti-hero. So, like Han Solo character type. And I do believe that all of the zodiac signs fall within 12 specific heroic archetypes, especially as it comes to men. Women have it as well, but remember, women are also embodiments of goddess energy, and you can't play both of those roles at the same time necessarily all the time unless you were here to be doing that. But regardless, I did have a crush on, not a crush, yeah, sure, I had a crush on turtles. But Raphael is like the darker and I don't want to say he's like the anti-Leo, but he would resent the leadership. Like, you don't really want to be told what to do. And anyone with Scorpio placements, that's pretty much a lot of, you're only going to be someone, you really have to respect someone for them to be able to tell you what to do. And even then, the orders, whatever you're being told, needs to make sense in your own grand mythos of things with Scorpio, because it just doesn't fly. You can't do this whole like, oh, I'm going to pretend it just doesn't work with Scorpio people. And Antares, actually, I'm not going to get too much detail about Antares because off the top of my head, I don't know the mythology or the stories right now. But as I said, we think of the scorpion as being both a water and land animal. It can go in and out of those things. And water in a fixed sign, like, it's a matter of like that depth of emotion, but you can get really intense and stuck in a certain state. So that's just one thing to look for when it comes to Scorpio, which is a positive thing to have when it comes to working past things, because you can tough it out, and that willpower, like, crush your enemies because no one's going to be able to outlast you. And so let's take a look at Donatello. Why am I jumping ahead? Because water and air are both much more like, fluid elements, but in fixed signs, it gives them a bit more structure. So they're very interesting types of fixed signs. That being said, am I jumping ahead? See, because I was jumping ahead to Donatello there. But Raphael, as a painter, as a Renaissance painter, he was Italian as well, and he was born April 6th, so that would make him an Aries. And yes, an Aries, and died April 6th. Well, that's interesting. He died on his birthday. Okay, and then his solar return day. You're only born once. Raphael, born April 6th in Italy and died April 6, 1520. He was a master painter and architect of the Italian High Renaissance. Raphael is best known for his Madonnas and for his large figure compositions in the Vatican. His school of Athens in the Stanza della Segnatura, a room for Pope Julius II private apartments in the Vatican, is perhaps the most famous of Raphael's paintings and one of the most significant artworks of the Renaissance period. His work is admired for its clarity of form and ease of composition, and for its visual achievement of the Neoplatonic ideal of the human grandeur. Ooh, so that's kind of Scorpio, like not Scorpionic per se, but this idea, Neoplatonic, Plato, not Pluto, but human grandeur, and this idea of, how should I put this? Yeah, so resurrection of Christ, and I want to see here if they talk a bit more about the style of painting, because perhaps there we can get a little bit more clues. Nevertheless, even in this early painting, it is clear that Raphael's sensibility was different than his teachers. The disposition of the figures is less rigidly related to the architecture, and the disposition of each figure in relation to the others is more informal and animated. The sweetness of the figures and the gentle relation between them surpasses anything in Perugino's work. So the gentle relation between them, that's an interesting thing that Raphael was actually particularly good at. Okay, so that's Raphael, Antares, Scorpio. Remember though, this is my interpretation of things. If you guys have a different opinion, I am more than happy to hear about it, if you want to let me know. Okay, so next we've got Fomalhaut, which is the mouth of the fish. I'm going to revisit this too, because being as we're in the age of Aquarius, it's kind of good to note all of these other waypoints as it comes to stars in the cosmos. It helps us like navigate what's going on with the turning of the ages, right? So Donatello, oh man, I should have put him in like one of those characters that like used to kind of annoy me, like the smart one in the group. He is kind of like Batman, like the gadgets. You always need the brains of the operation, which is why I included this little flask here. Aquarius, the water bearer carrying the water. And so there's this element here of fixedness, because you can depend on that intelligence, but also a level of not duality. That's not the right word. But like, for example, he may not seem like he's very social, but he does have like deep relationships with choice people. Like, he's known as April O'Neil's best friend. And if we think of like Aquarius and the idea of friendships and groups, that Aquarius rules those as well. And now Donatello as a Renaissance painter. Oh, sorry, he's an Italian sculptor. So, but see, like in terms of Renaissance, it's like all of these different mediums by which you can create art, and no one of them was just like, oh, I only draw, or like I only paint. They did a lot of other things as well. So a good deal is known about Donatello's life and career, but little is known about his character and personality, and what is known is not wholly reliable. He never married. Oh, interesting. Okay. And he seems to have been a man of simple tastes. Patrons often found him hard to deal with in a day when artists' working conditions were regulated by guild rules. So there was guild rules. What does that mean, guild rules? So they had a guild, merchant guilds or craft guilds. Craft guilds. Okay, so that's more commerce. But I guess there was guilds for the artists to have some sort of integrity in the work. I feel like we could use that right now, but there's always a shadow side to that kind of stuff, right? Like, now you're the one dictating like what art is, when like art's kind of like an inherent thing that you can perceive of. There's like no different than when you take photography classes or cinematography. Like, there's like the rule of thirds and certain rules to design principles, but your eye already recognizes that when you see that, you know, as opposed to it being taught to you. It's just like, oh, that's pleasing. But then when you know the theory, you can apply it, but you yourself like would be able to recognize something good yourself anyways. So this is Donatello's version of David. And it's not the David with a naked one with like the perfect form of David, but people like David, right? I guess this is the version of like, you know, when he David and Goliath, right? Let's see. The David originally intended for the cathedral was moved in 1416 to the Palazzo Vecchio, the city hall, where it stood as a civic patriotic symbol, although from the 16th century on it was eclipsed by the gigantic David of Michelangelo. So Donatello did a David, but Michelangelo's David is much more well known. I believe that's not... Why do I keep clicking on your face, Michelangelo? Sorry. But yeah, the other David is the one that I think people know more of. What is this one? St. George. Ooh, he did a sculpting of St. George. And there's a big Maltese myth about St. George and the dragon. Me and Kevin think that they're actually friends. But I'm going to save this. He's holding a shield and stuff, right? And this means something, because I feel like the fixed signs are more likely to be warriors. I know that that's a little bit controversial considering Aries, but I think it's maybe a type of warrior. To hold steadfast and never give up, don't give any quarter, that's very much a fixed kind of sign situation, as opposed to other elements of, I guess, warrior or heroic types. All right, I'm getting sidetracked. Let's go back to Donatello. I don't want to take too much time because I do want to do a reading later. But so Fomalhaut, Aquarius, Donatello. And then finally, last but not least, and this is going to be our nice little segue into comic books and the mythos of Leonardo da Vinci himself is like a magician. Because we've got Regulus, and Regulus is known as like that fixed star that's supposed to indicate royalty. Like, you're supposed, if you're born under a Regulus star, it's like, it means that you're going to be born into royalty or something like that, I think. And this is in the constellation of Leo, and that's why I figured like Leonardo matches up with that. The leader, the lion heart, the one who's like able to coordinate all the rest of the team members and their particular gifts in a way. And then Leonardo da Vinci was born April 15th, 1452. So he's an Aries, but he's coming close to being a Taurus, which is cool. He died May 2nd in France. Of course, he's known for the Mona Lisa, Last Supper, Leda, Portrait of Ginevra. What was that? Because the one thing about Leonardo da Vinci is that he was also like an inventor. Let's see what they say here about him specifically. I don't know if it's going to be able to cover everything exactly. Italian painter, draftsman, sculptor, architect, and engineer. This is unique to him, I think. Oops. Oh my gosh. There we go. His Last Supper and Mona Lisa are among the most wildly popular and influential paintings of the Renaissance, and his notebooks reveal a spirit of scientific inquiry and mechanical inventiveness that were centuries ahead of his time. And so Zatanna from the DC Comics is said to hail her ancestry from Leonardo da Vinci, and it's because in his notebooks, you know, like any magicians or alchemists of that time, especially with the church and religion, would have to hide their magical research or any of that in their notebooks so that they wouldn't be, you know, burned at the stake or like thought to be a heretic or anything like that. So he used to write everything backwards. And so Zatanna, when she does any of her spells, will like speak everything backwards. Fun fact. Let's see if they say anything else about Leonardo da Vinci. He also enjoyed unique fame during his lifetime. I should look at like the dates of these when they like. It seems like he died in 1519. That he made it longer. He's 67. Well, he's not the oldest. Leonardo's parents were unmarried at the time of his birth. His father was a notary and landlord, and his mother Katrina was a young peasant woman, who therefore shortly after married an artisan. So Leonardo grew up on his father's family estate where he was treated as a legitimate son. So he was an illegitimate son, but he was treated like he wasn't. So bastard son. But it's probably because of that, as I call it, thermodynamic miracle, where he was like meant to come into form. And so I kind of like that a lot. So that's Leonardo da Vinci and that connection to the DC universe and magic in general. So let's finish up. This is like about stars and magic and for more magic. So I'm just going to flip to here to close out this talk about the royal fixed stars, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as well as the Renaissance men and artists who have inspired these Ninja Turtles. Because when you think of naming, and full disclosure, this is why also in many of my books I chose to it's also because it is inspired by real people and my friends. It's also to give people names. It's amazing how, you know, Juliet says in Shakespeare, right, that what's in a name, and a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. However, there is a level of meaning that is attributed with a name that has all of this other stuff underneath it. So that when it comes to investigating and looking at characters, the name is, you know, whether or not it's a nickname, whether or not you go by like JP instead of John, all of that adds different nuance and flavor and texture to a characterization of an individual. And when it comes to astrology, I like to look at it as a story, and you in your birth chart have all of these planets, all of these positions that play out within you. And as you learn those, we will project certain things onto others. And it's important for us to note when we are playing out things that are internal and we're pushing that out. And that's okay if it can be done in a healthy way. And as long as we have some awareness of what it is that we're doing and not, you know, like band-aiding it or taking out certain things in other people, we can step into our highest, most heroic selves, even if we do have shadow sides to that, and do that. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation today, guys, about the 4 royal fixed stars, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo, and how those mapped out with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I hope that it helped you learn something today about how astrology and the fixed stars and characterizations and heroic archetypes, and how taking all that information together in your own way, in your own lens, can empower you in the game of life. So I hope you have a good one wherever you are residing in the cosmos, my friends. Until next time.